I was 72, the day I decided to stop pretending my life was still mine. The morning light on Bay Street bled through the shutters of my Charleston townhouse, carving pale bars across the Persian rug like a jail I had paid for myself. My hands, lined like river deltas, closed around a matte black box no larger than a matchbook. It hummed inside my palm, a heartbeat of circuits and cold intent. I had built a fortune on seeing what others missed. Timing, shadows, the silence right before a market turns. That skill had saved my empire more than once. It had not saved my marriage. Lila was 40 years my junior, ablaze in a house made of old wood. She laughed like champagne breaking open and moved through rooms as if gravity were an admirer. When she said, "I love you," I believed it the way you believe an elegant lie told for your benefit. Grateful, complicit, afraid to check the math. The box in my hand was the math. I waited until the valet brought the silver coupe around, watched its gleam slice the heat like a blade. Lila kissed my cheek, a perfumed brush, and slid behind the wheel, the summer dress falling like a spill of water. She waved, careless and bright, and I smiled back with the stiffness of a man who knows pictures are being taken somewhere he cannot see. When the engine purred awake, I crouched behind the lacquered fender and pressed the tracker into the seam under the rear bumper. The magnet caught with a soft click, terribly gentle like a pact. I told myself it was caution, a final audit before I signed over the trust we had drafted the week before. I told myself I had earned the right to certainty. Truth is, I was terrified of being the last to know. Money makes you visible in all the wrong ways. Age makes you invisible in all the right ones. Between these two utilities, a man can vanish from his own life without leaving a note. I refused to vanish. Not yet. The app lit up later that afternoon while I sat beneath the live oaks at the country club, listening to two men I had outlived argue about real estate taxes they would never actually pay. A blue dot moved across my screen with the calm precision of a surgeon's hand. East Bay. The bridge off the peninsula. Not to the spa, not to her Pilates class, not to the designer whose invoices arrived with the predictable cruelty of tides. The dot turned toward a scrub of industrial riverfront I owned on paper but had not visited in years, a silent row of warehouses that once held bourbon in oak and now held nothing but dust and the occasional mural of ambition. The dot stopped. I felt the heat leave my face as if pulled by a tide. Lila had no reason to be there unless the reason was one I did not want to name. I closed the app. I opened it. The dot waited, patient as a confession. A breeze lifted the Spanish moss. Somewhere behind me, cutlery chimed. I thought of the trust documents in my safe, of the discreet advice from polite men who called me by my first name as if we were at school together. I thought of Lila's hand on my sternum at night, her breath warm as summer fruit. My chest tightened until the world thinned. I stood, left money on the table none of us needed, and walked toward my car like a man who must prove something to a jury only he can see. When I reached the river road, the light had shifted into that pale, forgiving gold that makes even rust look like an heirloom. I parked behind a stand of palmettos and watched the corrugated walls, the blacked windows funhouse bent by summer glare. The app said she was inside. I imagined laughter. I imagined bodies, the cruel, mechanical rhythm of younger years. I imagined my own face, if there were cameras, a museum exhibit titled The Final Fool. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned ivory and counted my breaths like coins. Inside those breaths, something colder than outrage began to form, a shape, an angle. I knew then I would go inside. I knew whatever I found would change the rest of my days, whether I wanted change or not. I cut the engine. The cicadas roared. I stepped into the heat and the smell of river and old boards. Every footfall against the gravel sounded like punctuation. Every shadow looked like a verdict. I put my hand on the rusted handle of the service door, pulled, and told myself the truth a man says when he's about to commit a sin he can justify. This is for our future, but the worst was yet to come. My name is Edwin March. If you search long enough, you can find photographs of me tipping champagne into a boat the year before the dot-com crash. You can find headlines where my last name appears next to words like foundation and endowment. And you can find other headlines where it appears next to words like predatory, which is just what people call excellence when it threatens them. I say this not to impress you, but to explain the math of my life. I had resources that could buy almost anything, except the feeling I had when Lila looked at me as if she had picked me on purpose. That feeling is the only luxury an old man cannot wire to his door. I met Lila at a fundraiser in Savannah. She wore a black dress that looked like a question, and I answered it by offering the kind of conversation she told me she never got from men who were her age. I did not pretend she fell in love with my face. She fell in love with the peace I could give her and the doors I could open, and I fell in love with the way she made my days feel less like an afterward. We built a marriage on this mutual rescue. It was not the worst bargain I had ever made, but bargains demand accounting. I noticed how her phone learned new silences, how her calendar developed a fog of appointments that lived just outside the ridge of verifiable facts. How she brought home a scent I could not name, metallic and sweet, like rain on copper. Suspicion is a solvent. It turns history into evidence. I began replaying scenes, listening to my own memory, as if it were an unreliable witness. I asked simple questions the way auditors do, stacked and innocent. She answered cleanly, almost too cleanly. A younger man might have confronted her then, played the righteous fool, thrown plates. I collected companies in my time by not throwing plates. I collected the tracker instead. When I slid into that warehouse corridor, the air cooled by a single groaning fan, my mind tallied the possible outcomes like a term sheet. Outcome A. I would find a tryst, and the world would turn red in a way that would cost me everything I pretended I no longer valued. Outcome B. I would find nothing, and the shame of my suspicion would build a wall between us higher than any adultery. Outcome C. I would find something worse than either. I laugh now at the efficiency of my dread. We think we want clarity. We survive on ambiguity. Before I take you into that room, I need to say something to anyone listening alone in a kitchen or a car, to anyone who has stared at a door with a hand that would not stop shaking. Your life will be bent by the truth you open and the lies you keep. The shape of that bend is what people will call your character. If you keep watching, I will show you the bend that broke me and why, even broken, I am still here. I will show you every turn, and I will make you feel each step the way I did. Because the body does not lie, even when the mind begs it to. Stay with me. Tell me where you are watching from, your city, your street, the room with the window that overlooks something you have not yet named. Say it aloud if you must. It helps to be anchored. It helps to be counted. I'm not here to preach or to punish. I'm here to confess, which is just another word for making the private public. I want you to hear the scrape of that door in your bones. I want you to notice the way walls hold secrets better than people do. I want you to know that wealth is a light that casts longer shadows. If this story keeps you awake tonight, good. We make our worst mistakes in daylight and live with them in the dark. Subscribe if you have the appetite for truth told without anesthetic. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from, so I can imagine your porch light while I continue. Take a breath with me. We are going inside now, and I promise you, what I found is not what you think, and what I did after will make you question the part of yourself you have been calling decent. I turned the handle. The fan moaned like an old ship. Somewhere, a gull screamed. A light flickered awake in a back office, as if it had been waiting for me to pull it from sleep. The tracker said she was 20 feet away. My heart said I had already lost something I would never get back. I stepped through the half-lit maze of pallets and ghosted racks, not knowing yet that every step I took was being watched by eyes I had paid to protect me. But the worst was yet to come. The office smelled like spilled coffee and furniture polish, the scent of a job someone once cared about. Lila stood with her back to me, her hair braided, the kind of practical braid I had rarely seen on her. She wore jeans and a white shirt knotted at the waist. She looked smaller in that light, the way a person looks when they are themselves instead of a performance. She had not heard me yet. Across from her, a man in a navy polo sat at a desk, tapping a laptop, his posture the efficient slump of a technician. I knew him. His name was Colby Reed, one of the security consultants my chief of staff had hired when we started getting those letters last winter, the ones made of cut-out headlines that called me a thief and promised me an ending. We had chalked them up to the usual theatre of wealth. We had increased patrols. I had not expected the theatre to move indoors. "Lila," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I wanted. She flinched. Colby did not. He looked up, measured me with the cool indifference of a man whose invoices were paid on time, and then he stood. Lila turned, and for a second the expression on her face held the whole length of our marriage. The surprise of spring, the summer of easy days, the first dry leaves of fall, then winter, anger fast and white. "Edwin," she said, and my name in her mouth was a hinge. "What is this?" I asked. "Why are you here with him? What are you doing following me?" She shot back, chin lifting. "Who put something under my car?" We stared at each other across that desk like competitors who had lured each other to the same trap and now argued over who owned the patents. Colby flicked his eyes between us, an umpire already bored of the game. "You hired him," I said to Lila, though I saw the flaw in the sentence even as it left me. I had hired him, just not for this. "I asked him to help me," she said. Her voice softened, and I hated that I wanted to believe that softness. "And I didn't tell you because I needed one thing in this house that wasn't under your glass bell." The laptop screen showed blue maps and timestamps. My tracker app flashed in my pocket like an exposed lie. Colby cleared his throat. "Mr. March," he said, "your wife asked me to sweep the vehicles and the house. We found something else. The tracker is the least of it. There are sentences that rearrange the furniture of a room. That one knocked a lamp off an end table in my mind. I felt the urge to deny, to accuse, to regain ground with the blunt instrument of age and money, but I had survived too many boardrooms to mistake leverage. I stepped closer. On the screen, a scatter of dots patterning our days. Not my dots, not hers. Dots around the house perimeter, around the guest house, around the sedan we lent to staff. Patterns designed to look like noise until you knew what the music was. "How long?" I asked. 3 months, Colby said. "Whoever set these wanted to see rhythms. It wasn't paparazzi. They wouldn't waste this kind of patience. And it wasn't amateurs. Signal hopping, dead drops for batteries. We found a nest of receivers in the hedges by the west gate. Someone has been studying your routines, your staff rotations, your routes to the airport, Mrs. March's errands. Someone who knows the difference between surveillance and spooking." I thought of the letters. I thought of the Foundation's latest land deal on the river, a deal that had lit up city council meetings like bonfires. I thought of partners I'd made rich and enemies I'd made richer in rage. Lila watched my face the way a person watches a storm, one hand at her throat. "I came here," she said, "because I didn't want your name on any of this until I understood it. I know how you move when you think someone's coming for you. I wanted to protect you from yourself." It should have soothed me. It landed like a confession I didn't know how to process. The old scripts, cheating, betrayal, evaporated, leaving me with something more dangerous. The possibility that I had been wrong about the nature of the threat. The possibility that my wife had been braver than I had allowed. "And why did you need him?" I asked, nodding at Colby, still needing someone to fault. "Because your people work for you," she said simply. "I needed someone who would work for me." Colby turned the screen again. Video now, thermal fuzz, a figure moving along the backyard colonnade at 2 in the morning. The shape paused at the French doors of my office, as casual as a guest stepping out for a smoke. The lock glowed faintly red. The figure did not open it. It did not try. It moved on to the guest house, to the garage, to the service path that led to the kitchen door where the staff left earlier than dawn. It knew where to look, and it knew when not to touch. Confidence is a signature. "Who is it?" I asked. Colby shrugged. "You pay me to know. So far, I don't." The warehouse walls seemed to press in. I felt all my years at once, a click in the spine, a clouding at the edges of my sight. I had come here to confirm a domestic tragedy, and instead I had found a siege. Part of me wanted to apologize to Lila. Part of me wanted to drag her out by the wrist and lock her in a safe I'd invent for the purpose. Both impulses felt like the vanity of a man who still thought control could cure dread. "The trust," I said. "Tomorrow, we sign it." Lila blinked. "You still want after this?" "I want to do one thing in my life that isn't dictated by fear." Her eyes shone in a way I had not seen in months. I mistook it for love. What it was, I would not understand until much later. Colby closed the laptop. "There's another thing," he said, his voice careful. "The receivers. They're powered by a microgrid tapping your west wall. Somebody had a contractor on the property, somebody with codes." I thought of Sam Whitaker, my COO for 20 years, who knew our schedules better than I did. I thought of the gardener who had been with us since Lila moved in, the only staff member she had insisted on keeping after the redecorations. I thought of the men on the city council who wanted the riverfront for their own cousins. I thought of my son, Daniel, who had not spoken to me in 5 years and who had texted me 2 words last month, "Good luck," after a hearing I had won and he had wanted me to lose. "Whoever it is," Colby said, "they're building towards something. Patterns like this are rehearsal, not performance. I have stood at the edges of hurricanes and watched the ocean gather itself like a boxer. That is how the air felt in that office." Lila reached for my hand and stopped. I looked at her fingers suspended above mine, a bridge being negotiated at the last minute. My phone buzzed, a notification, a new movement pinged from the tracker under Lila's car. But the car was here. The app didn't care. It showed the dot leaving the warehouse. It showed velocity. It showed a destination I knew as intimately as I knew my own pulse, our house on Bay Street. A ghost car. But the worst was yet to come. We followed the blue phantom out of the industrial strip and into the kind of evening that tricks you into believing you are safe. Colby drove. I sat in the back with Lila, the distance between us exact as a math problem. The car smelled faintly of gun oil and mint gum. Through the windshield, Charleston performed its antique charm, a theater of brick and iron and oaks, gas lamps lifting small halos against the falling dark. The app pulsed. The ghost dot slid toward home with a confidence that tasted like mockery. "Clones," Colby said. "Someone copied your tracker's ID and stitched it onto another device. Old trick, sleight of hand at scale." "Why copy it?" I asked. "So you'd watch the wrong thing." The wrong thing arrived at our door at 9:12. Our gates parted for it like loyal soldiers. We parked half a block away and cut through the neighbor's garden with the shamelessness of emergency. I wanted to run. My body did not agree. Lila moved beside me like a roomer in white cotton, barefoot now, shoes in hand. Colby spoke into his sleeve in that way men in his profession like to do, murmuring coordinates to 2 more of his team who had been circling our block since noon. The house looked like a painting of itself. Light spilled from the library, the rest was shadow. I smelled the jasmine and the river and the faint acrid bite of electrics running harder than they had yesterday. We slipped through the service gate. Colby touched my arm with 2 fingers. "Wait," and then sent a man the size of an armoire ahead. The armoire ghosted across the kitchen, then the hallway, then the library doorway. He lifted a hand. Clear. We entered. The tracker dot sat in the middle of the Persian rug like a blue sun. On the chair by the window lay a device the size of a coin, blinking with cheerful deceit. Beside it a single sheet of paper, thick and cream, embossed with my foundation's seal, my name, a line in ink: "We take what you take, return what you stole. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pier C, come alone." There are words that still prefer the elegance of ink. What did you steal? Lila asked, eyes on me so calm I couldn't decide if it was judgment or faith. I acquired, I said. Someone thinks otherwise, Colby said. He bent, sniffed the coin, touched it with a gloved finger. It's not just a clone. It's a flare. A flare for what, we learned when the house went dark. The lights folded in like origami. The security system chirped, offended, then surrendered. The quiet was instant and heavy. I heard the river before I heard the footsteps. Soft, deliberate, 3 states away from panic. 2 men in balaclavas walked into my library with the certainty of guests who had received an invitation. One held a small duffel, the other held nothing except the posture of a man who believed in his God. Colby's armoire moved like nature through the opposite door and took the first man to the floor before my heart remembered to accelerate. The second man pivoted, reached into the duffel, and in one fluid motion produced not a gun, but a camera. An old film Leica, black as a threat. He lifted it, pointed it at me, and clicked. The sound was obscene in the dark. A flash washed the room in magnesium daylight, and in that flare I saw the outline of the photographer's jaw, the scar that cut his lower lip like a river. "Hello, Mr. March," he said, when the after-image burned off the air. His accent tasted of the Carolinas, with education layered over it like a sheen. "You took a peer no one wanted and made it into a promise to your donors. You took tax abatements no one offered and invented them. We would like, for one afternoon, for you to feel the arithmetic from the other side." "I've made enemies," I said, too dry. "Not enemies," he corrected. "Students." He tossed the duffel to the rug. "Money fell out like green birds, not mine, photocopies. The kind handed out in theatre to make a point. Symbolism is a cudgel wielded by men who lack patience for nuance. You'll come tomorrow," he said, "or the second act plays without your consent." "What's the second act?" I asked. He smiled. The scar deepened. "You'll like the title," he said, "The Widowmaker." Lila stepped forward then, so smooth it took me 3 seconds to understand what I was seeing. She placed herself between me and the camera, as if she had rehearsed the move. "You chose the wrong house," she said, and her voice carried a weight I had not put into her hands. "You mistake performance for power." The man's gaze flicked to her. Something like respect passed through it, a current recognizing another. "Mrs. March," he said, "you've been very busy. Tell me, does he know about Aspen?" I felt the universe tilt 4 degrees. Aspen. The house she said she hated, the house she visited twice a year for the sake of appearances and altitude, the house we had not entered in 9 months. My mouth went dry. "What about Aspen?" I asked, and hated the tremor in my voice. The man chuckled softly, as if we were all adults here. He touched the camera. "Rehearsal," he said. "As I told you, Pier C, 2 o'clock. Alone, as requested, or the hills get news they will not want." He backed away with the practical grace of a thief who's allergic to heroics. Colby's man let the first intruder stand, cuffed and panting. The cameraman slipped through the hallway, down the steps, and out into the night, leaving a silence that clicked back in like a soundtrack dropped onto the scene in post. "Aspen," Lila said, eyes on the floor. "I should tell you before someone else does." "You'll tell me everything," I said, ice around the words not for effect, but to keep them from boiling over. I wanted to break the camera. I wanted to break the man who held it. I wanted to break the part of me that had believed marriage could be a shelter from the weather a man like me brings with him. Lila looked up. The calm was gone. In its place, a thin, trembling rage. "I went to Aspen to meet someone who hates you," she said. "I went to protect you from what I thought he would do. I went to keep him from turning your life into what he called a lesson." "Who?" I asked. "Daniel," she said. "Your son." The room shifted under my feet, a landmass breaking. Colby's face didn't move, but his eyes did. The armoire stopped breathing. Somewhere outside, a siren found its purpose. I gripped the back of a chair, because gravity had not been warned about this plot twist. My boy, now a man who measured me with another man's rulers. My blood, turned lawyer, turned opponent at city hearings, turned prophet on sidewalks where cameras like to perch. I had cut him out of one deal, and he had cut me out of 5 holidays. We called that balance. I had not expected him to enlist my wife. The edges of the room sharpened. A story I thought I was telling myself about a wandering wife became something else, a siege designed by a son who wanted to teach me the price of triumph. I felt old then. Not in the body, but in the ledger. The kind of old that collapses even gold into dust. Aspen, I repeated, and found my voice again. What did he ask you to do? Lila's answer broke the last good bone left in my certainty, but the worst was yet to come. He asked me to wear a wire, Lila said, the words barely sound, to make you say on tape what you only imply in boardrooms. He wanted to build a case in the court that matters to him, the court of the people who comment online. He said if I helped him, he'd stop the men outside our gates. He said he could call them off. He said he had leverage on them because he made them. I closed my eyes and saw my son at 11, face fierce with moral algebra, dividing the world into fair and foul. With a ruler, he had sharpened himself. I had admired that rigidity once. Then I had found it inconvenient. Then I had called it naive. Then I had ignored it. Nature is not a fan of being ignored. I told him no, Lila continued. At first. Then the letters started arriving. Then a drone hovered over the garden party and dropped pamphlets that looked like bonds, but weren't. Then a city inspector asked questions that had been rehearsed by someone who knew our files. I met Daniel in Aspen because I didn't want to make a war in our kitchen. I told him there had to be another way to make his point. He laughed and said points are for people who have time. He said the river doesn't have time. Colby rubbed his jaw. He's not wrong about the river. Is he wrong about me? I asked, not because I expected mercy, but because confession requires a witness. Wrong about your methods, Colby said, not unkindly. Right about your results. I nodded because there are sentences that are both verdict and balm. I sat at last, the fabric of my suit cooling against the leather like a reassurance that I still existed. Lila remained standing, stranded between me and the window, her silhouette an algebra of doubt and loyalty. I thought of the tracker under her bumper, the childishness of it, and the way childishness hardens into cruelty if left alone too long. We go to the pier tomorrow, I said, alone, as requested. Colby began to protest, stopped, and recalculated. You'll wear what I give you, he said, and you'll let me station eyes where nobody will notice. Lila stepped closer. You don't have to go, she said. We can call the police like people who believe in order. I invented a kind of disorder and sold it as progress for 4 decades, I said. I won't ask a uniform to fix what I built. Night pressed against the windows like a patient creditor. I asked Colby for a moment with my wife. He withdrew, taking the armoire and the cuffed man and the counterfeit money with him. Lila and I stood in a library that had held every story except ours. I put the tracker on your car, I said, because I was afraid. I hid you from your son, she said, because I was afraid. We stood in our confessions like 2 parishioners at different altars. The house hummed to life again as backup systems found their faith. I poured us water. We drank like people who had been at sea. She reached for my hand and did not stop this time. Her fingers fit mine as if they had forgotten nothing. At the pier, I said, I won't give them what they want. What do they want? She asked. Proof that I am the man they think I am, I said. Proof that money buys a way out of everything, including shame. The next day, the sky over the river was a blank face. Pier C smelled of salt and creosote and city politics. I walked the boards with my cane like any old man out to greet his end. Cameras watched from nowhere. Colby's eyes watched from everywhere. At 2 o'clock, the man with the Leica appeared, carrying a satchel that held theater and threat in equal measure. 10 steps behind him, a young man with my jaw and my father's shoulders and anger like a flag. My son. He looked at me as if he were reading a report of a disaster he had predicted. The Leica man let the silence stretch, then said, You stole a river. I shook my head. I leased outcomes. I said. At a price we negotiated with people who needed something more than purity. Daniel's mouth tightened. You call it negotiation when you show up with leverage and call it charity. You call it justice when you show up with a camera and call it truth, I said. We stood there on that pier with the wind turning our words into weather. The Leica man opened his satchel, expecting my fear. I gave him something else. I handed him a folder of papers notarized at dawn, transfers for easements and public access, commitments of funds to undo what had been done where it could be undone, scholarships tied to the next generation of engineers we would need when the tides pushed harder. It wasn't everything. It was what I could do without lying to myself. He riffled the pages. He disliked them for the same reason he respected them. They were measurable. Daniel read over his shoulder, then looked at me with a fury complicated by grief. This doesn't absolve you, he said. I'm not trying to be absolved, I said. I'm trying to be useful while I'm still here. The Leica man lifted his camera. He did not click. He closed it. Performance, he said softly. But I heard something like surrender under the word. Lila stepped out from where she had been waiting at the mouth of the pier, no longer hiding in anyone's shadow. She spoke to my son with a softness I had never interestingly earned. Your father is an ocean with old maps, she said. Help me redraw them before we drown. No final speech cured anything. No sudden embrace bridged 10 missed Christmases. But the performance our enemies wanted, the grovel, the meltdown, never arrived. They left with their theatre dampened by paperwork and a kind of work that turns slowly like a ship. We went home with the understanding that the worst thing in a house is not infidelity or even deceit, it is contempt. We resolved to remove it as if it were mold. That night I took the tracker from Lila's car. I placed it on my desk and stared at it until the river turned silver. I thought about the lesson my son had tried to teach me with cameras and threat. I thought about the lesson my wife had taught me by going to a mountain to stop a war I had already started in my mind. I thought about the bend of a life and how it can be altered late, not to erase the past, but to keep the future from curdling in the same bowl. If you've stayed with me to the end, take this. Love without trust is performance, and power without doubt is rot. I am still rich. I am still old. I am learning to be other things too. If this story rang your bones, subscribe. Tell me where you listened from. Tell me what door you are afraid to open. I will not promise that opening it will save you. I will promise that keeping it closed will not. I'm going to sleep now under a roof that no longer hums with secrets. Tomorrow I will make calls that will cost me, and I will pay. I expect the river to outlast my name. That thought for the first time does not make me want to fight the tide, but the worst was yet to come.